Jackson Reed had worked as a mechanic on countless ships, but he had never seen a storm like this. The Starliner Solace, a colossal, gleaming vessel designed for intergalactic transport, was Jackson's most recent assignment, a temporary contract to get him out of debt. But now, in the belly of a dying ship, his contract didn't mean much. Alarms screamed as the Solace fought against the brutal meteor shower, metal groaning and sparks flying. Jackson was alone in the engine room, clutching the console as the ship's systems blared every possible warning. He'd patched half a dozen breaches and rewired countless circuits, but he was fighting a losing battle. The hull was compromised, and the ship's navigational systems were offline, rendering the Solace little more than a helpless mass of metal drifting into the gravitational pull of the uncharted planet below. Jackson's fingers flew over the console, trying to divert power to the thrusters, anything to prevent the descent. But the ship's systems were dead, and in the few seconds of calm before everything came undone, Jackson knew it was over. He managed to send a quick distress signal, hoping that someone, somewhere, would pick it up. And then, with a shuddering jolt, the ship broke apart, and everything went dark. When Jackson woke up, he was sprawled on the muddy ground, the hot sun of an alien world pressing down on him. Above, the sky was split by thin, dark clouds streaked with veins of green and gold. His ship, what was left of it, was scattered around him, debris stretched out across a dense, almost luminous jungle. He groaned, pushing himself up, every part of his body aching. The jungle around him seemed alive in ways that he couldn't immediately process. Plants with broad, neon-colored leaves pulsed softly, as if breathing, and flowers turned to follow his movement. The air was thick and sweet, humming with strange, melodic calls from unseen creatures. Jackson took a deep breath, trying to control his rising panic. He had survived the crash, but he was on an alien world, and his only hope of rescue was that his distress signal had somehow been received. Jackson spent the first few days establishing the basics of survival. He fashioned a makeshift shelter from the wreckage, using his knowledge of engineering to create a solar still for water and repair a damaged emergency food pack. But his supplies wouldn't last forever, and the realization was setting in: if no one found him soon, he'd have to find a way to survive on this strange planet indefinitely. As the days turned to weeks, Jackson noticed an odd pattern emerging. Every night, just as the sky darkened to reveal two gleaming moons, a faint melody drifted through the jungle. It was haunting, almost hypnotic, a series of high-pitched whistles and low, rhythmic hums that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. At first, he dismissed it as some kind of natural phenomenon, a mating call, perhaps, or the sound of wind through hollow trees. But as he listened, he realized it wasn't random. There was structure, a melody and rhythm, almost like language. On the 12th night, as he lay under the shelter's thin canopy, Jackson heard the melody grow louder, closer. He sat up, squinting into the darkness, heart pounding. The sound swelled, a strange harmony that seemed to resonate in his chest. And then, out of the shadows, figures began to emerge. They were unlike anything Jackson had ever seen. Tall and lithe, with elongated limbs and translucent skin that shimmered like pearl, they looked like living stardust. Their features were alien but astonishingly beautiful, with high cheekbones, large, violet eyes that glowed in the darkness, and hair that flowed like silver water. They were draped in woven garments that glinted under the moon's light, blending seamlessly with the jungle around them. Jackson felt his breath catch. It was as if the stars themselves had taken form and walked among the trees. He didn't move as they approached, unsure if they were friend or foe. They stopped a few feet away, watching him with a mix of curiosity and caution. One of them, a female figure with a particularly striking gaze, stepped forward. She raised a hand, palm facing him, and Jackson instinctively mirrored the gesture, hoping it was some form of greeting. She tilted her head, a slight smile tugging at the corner of her mouth, her violet eyes shining. Jackson felt an odd sense of relief, his tension ebbing in her presence. Unable to understand their language, Jackson resorted to gestures, miming hunger and thirst to show his need for help. The female alien seemed to understand, nodding slowly. She stepped forward, gesturing for him to follow, and led him deeper into the jungle. Jackson hesitated for a moment, glancing back at his shelter and the remnants of his ship, before following her. They led him to a hidden village, a collection of organic structures that seemed to grow directly out of the trees. The buildings were woven from vines and bioluminescent moss, casting a soft glow that bathed the entire area in an ethereal light. The air was filled with a delicate scent, floral and slightly spicy, that seemed to calm his nerves. Jackson soon learned that these people, the Loraki, as he came to call them, were highly attuned to their environment. They lived in harmony with the planet's ecosystem, using bioorganic technology that was both functional and alive. Machines pulsed with organic energy, shaped by the Loraki's hands, responding to the soft melodies they hummed and chanted. It was unlike anything Jackson had ever encountered, a seamless blend of nature and technology that he found both humbling and awe-inspiring. The Loraki didn't speak in words, but in a language of song and gesture, a rhythmic exchange that felt as much like dance as it did communication. Over time, Jackson began to pick up on the basics of their language, learning to recognize the tones that indicated different emotions and intentions. The female who had first approached him became his guide, and he nicknamed her Mira, for her gentle, mirroring nature. She seemed fascinated by him, often studying his hands as he worked or examining the small tools he had salvaged from the wreckage. As the weeks turned into months, Jackson found himself becoming part of the tribe. He adapted to their ways, learning to use their tools and understand their customs. In return, he shared what he knew of machinery, fixing their organic constructs and creating tools they had never seen. The Loraki were endlessly curious, and Jackson became something of a marvel to them, the earth mechanic, as Myra's lilting song translated. Though he felt a growing sense of belonging, Jackson never forgot his home. Each night, as he lay under the glowing canopy of Lyris 9, he would look up at the stars and wonder if anyone was looking back. Earth felt like a distant memory, a fading dream, but the longing to return persisted. Yet, even as he clung to that hope, he couldn't deny the warmth he felt here, surrounded by beings who had shown him compassion and friendship beyond anything he'd ever known. In the quiet of the jungle nights, the melodies of the Loraki began to seep into his soul, and Jackson realized that he was no longer simply surviving, he was living, in a way he never had before. Time lost its usual grip on Jackson Reed. Weeks turned into months, and months began to blur together in the endless rhythm of life on Lyris 9. Jackson felt himself becoming part of the alien tribe, not just as a strange visitor from a distant world, but as a member, learning to live as they did. The Loraki, these ethereal beings with violet eyes and luminescent skin, had become his new family. In these early days, survival was his first priority, but as he adapted, Jackson found himself fascinated by the Loraki way of life. The Loraki lived in tune with their planet, drawing energy from the very land around them. They grew their buildings from bioorganic material, their homes woven from vines and glowing moss, which pulsed with a faint, comforting warmth. Each structure seemed alive, subtly shifting in response to their needs. Jackson learned that the Loraki could communicate with these structures through song's melodies that guided growth, repaired damage, or adjusted temperature. The planet itself seemed to respond to their voices. For a mechanic like Jackson, it was a revelation. He was used to machinery with hard edges, rigid systems, and manufactured parts. But here, technology was organic, soft, and adaptive, merging seamlessly with the natural environment. Jackson became particularly enamored with the Loraki tools, which he soon realized were biomachines, part living plant, part crafted device. At first, he felt like a clumsy outsider, fumbling with these delicate mechanisms, but the Loraki showed him patience and encouragement. Mira, his constant companion and guide, was especially patient, often humming gentle, encouraging melodies as she helped him understand each device's unique properties. One evening, Mira led Jackson to the heart of the village, where a large, intricate biomachine stood, a kind of ancient, humming structure known to the Loraki as the Memory Keeper. As Mira explained through a series of gestures and songs, the Memory Keeper stored the collective knowledge of the tribe, a living archive of their history, culture, and teachings. Jackson was amazed. It was a library, a council, and a workshop all in one, accessible only through the harmonic tunes that the Laraki sang. It was here that Jackson's role as a mechanic took on a new meaning. The Memory Keeper had been faltering, its melodies dim and off-tune, unable to store information properly. Jackson saw it as a machine in need of repair, but the Laraki had never considered fixing it in that way. To them, the Memory Keeper was a living entity with a spirit of its own, and they approached it with reverence rather than the interventionist mindset Jackson was accustomed to. However, after much pleading and careful demonstration, he convinced them to let him try his hand at a repair. Using his engineering skills and parts salvaged from the wreck of the Solace, Jackson managed to tune the Memory Keeper. His adjustments amplified the harmonic tones and restored the machine's full functionality, drawing gasps and songs of gratitude from the Laraki who witnessed the transformation. Mira watched with shining eyes as the machine pulsed back to life, and Jackson realized he had earned something invaluable, their trust. From then on, Jackson was more than just a visitor. He was their mechanic, a guardian of their technology. He spent his days maintaining the village's biomachines, making adjustments, and devising new tools. The Laraki songs became his blueprint, each melody guiding him to understand the machine's unique rhythms and requirements. The tribe gave him an affectionate name, Songhand, in honor of his ability to coax life from their machines with both touch and tune. In return, Jackson began to teach the Laraki some of his earth-based mechanics, showing them simple principles like levers, gears, and pulleys, which intrigued them. Though their organic technology was advanced in its own way, the Laraki found joy in these new ideas, marveling at the principles that allowed for physical manipulation without their usual songs. Jackson and Mira often worked together late into the twin moon nights, crafting hybrid tools that combined earth mechanics with Laraki biotech. Their favorite creation was a small generator that worked as a music box, its crank winding to play a melody that filled the air with gentle, metallic notes. But Jackson was not only learning the physical aspects of Laraki life. The more time he spent among them, the more he absorbed their worldview, a deep respect for the interconnectedness of all things. Every living being, every plant, every rock, and every stream was seen as an essential part of the greater harmony of life. The Laraki treated Jackson's machines with the same reverence as a living creature, often singing to them softly as if in conversation. Through this, Jackson began to feel a transformation within himself. Earth, with its relentless pace and artificial divides between human and nature, felt farther away with each passing day. He found himself caring for the land, tending to the jungle in ways he never would have considered before, following the Laraki's example. He even took up the daily ritual of singing to his machines, letting the melodies flow as he worked, grateful for the opportunity to exist in this delicate balance. Yet, amid the peace he found, a familiar ache lingered in his heart. Earth was still there, somewhere, far beyond the twin moons. Though he tried to suppress it, he could not shake the longing to see the stars as he had from his home planet, to walk on Earth's soil, to see the skyline of a city once more. Mira noticed this, her violet eyes perceptive and understanding, and though she did not press him to share, her presence beside him was a constant reassurance. One evening, as they sat beside a silvery river, Mira looked at him with a question in her eyes. He struggled to explain, piecing together the Laraki phrases he'd learned, trying to convey his longing for home. Mira listened, nodding with that serene understanding he had come to cherish. She sang a soft, mournful melody in response, a song that spoke of the Laraki's own stories of loss and of leaving behind loved ones on distant parts of the planet during their seasonal migrations. Earth, Jackson said softly, his voice breaking. Mira tilted her head, her lips forming the word awkwardly, almost reverently. He smiled, taking her hand and guiding it through a drawing in the sand of Earth's shape, a sphere floating in the vast blackness of space. He explained, in broken phrases, of cities filled with thousands, of technology made from metal and wires, of a sky with only one moon. Mira listened, her gaze filled with wonder and a hint of sadness. But Jackson's greatest gift to Mira and the Laraki came one night during the Harvest Festival. It was a grand celebration, with songs that resonated throughout the jungle and feasts laid out beneath the bioluminescent trees. Jackson, encouraged by the Laraki's enthusiasm, decided to share a piece of Earth culture with them. Using a scrap of metal and wire from his emergency kit, he fashioned a crude musical instrument, something between a guitar and a harp. He played a simple melody, a song from Earth, and the Laraki fell silent. The familiar tune felt surreal in this alien world, as if he were bridging two realms with the sound. Myra's eyes glistened as she listened, her hand lightly brushing his as if afraid the song would end too soon. When he finished, the Laraki began to hum, picking up the tune, weaving it into their own melodies, and soon, the whole tribe was singing his Earth song, blending it with their ethereal harmonies. In that moment, Jackson felt as though he belonged to two worlds at once, bound to the Laraki by shared songs, yet tethered to Earth by memory. He had found a family here, a place where he was needed and respected. But he couldn't deny the call of Earth, the echo of another life that lingered in his heart. As the Harvest Festival drew to a close, Jackson gazed up at the twin moons, a quiet resolve forming in his mind. He knew that he had become a part of the Laraki, that he had adapted to their world and found peace in their way of life. But he also knew that someday, somehow, he would have to find a way back. The question was, when that time came, would he be ready to leave this beautiful, harmonious world behind? Jackson had come to accept his life on Lyris 9, blending human ingenuity with Laraki harmony, living as both mechanic and tribesman. 20 years had slipped by, unmarked by anything but the rise and fall of the planet's twin moons. By now, Jackson no longer expected to return to Earth. Yet something within him had never fully let go, lingering in the jungle shadows like a forgotten tune. One morning, Mira led him to an ancient grove deep within the jungle, where the bioluminescent trees were older, taller, their branches woven tightly together to form a dense canopy. She brought him to an intricately carved structure embedded in the largest tree trunk, a relic from a civilization even older than the Laraki. The Laraki called it the Dreamer's Voice, a name that translated awkwardly into Jackson's limited understanding of their language. He had only ever seen it from a distance, as it was considered sacred, a relic of the ancestors' connection to the stars. But this time was different. Mira held Jackson's hand, guiding him forward, her expression unreadable, yet solemn. She gestured for him to approach the Dreamer's Voice, giving him a look of encouragement mixed with the shadow of something he couldn't place. Cautiously, he stepped closer, running his hands over the alien symbols etched into the tree, feeling a faint hum beneath his fingers. As he inspected the structure, he realized that it was more than just a monument. At its heart was a core of living technology, a dormant device, silent yet brimming with latent energy. Jackson's pulse quickened. With his experience repairing Laraki biomachines, he began to recognize patterns in the grooves and circuits. His mechanic's mind kicked in, instinctively assessing, recalibrating, making sense of this foreign device. Jackson spent the following days carefully examining the Dreamer's Voice. By using his knowledge of Earth's machinery and everything he'd learned from the Laraki, he was able to unlock layers of the device, coaxing it back to life. He connected it to a small generator he'd built from Laraki biomaterial and the remaining components from the Solace. Finally, with Mira and a small group of Laraki watching, he activated the Dreamer's Voice, hoping for nothing more than to hear its ancient melody. But then, a voice crackled through the air, a faint, staticky hum filled with patches of familiar words. Jackson's heart leapt. It was Earth, reaching out across the void, a signal from his distant home. It was weak, fragmented, but unmistakably human. A chill ran through him as he heard voices, English words, disjointed, but clear enough to recognize his own name, spoken in the familiar cadence of Earth's communication. Mira and the others looked at him in awe as he processed the signal. After all these years, Earth hadn't forgotten him. The transmission contained fragments of a message, heavily degraded but unmistakable. Jackson read survivor of the Solace, if you can hear this, coordinate response rescue attempt Lyris 9. Jackson's hands trembled as he realized the implications. Earth was searching for him, waiting for his response, prepared to launch a rescue mission. He could go home. The thought sent a wave of exhilaration through him, a dream he'd long buried, reignited with sudden intensity. He could see the skyscrapers again, the crowded streets, the ocean stretching endlessly under a single moon. But as the elation surged, so did the weight of what he'd be leaving behind. The Lyraki gathered around him, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. Mira, especially, watched him with that deep, understanding gaze, as if sensing the storm of emotions within him. She placed a gentle hand on his arm, her eyes meeting his with a quiet question. That night, Jackson lay awake, staring up at the star-filled sky through the canopy. For years, he had dreamed of seeing Earth again, of touching its soil, of being surrounded by his own kind. But now, the thought of leaving filled him with a wrenching sadness. He had a family here, Mira, who had been his closest companion, and the Lyraki, who had shown him a new way of life, a harmony he had never known on Earth. He had learned to love their songs, their rituals, their world of living machines. The following day, Mira joined him as he returned to the dreamer's voice. She could sense his turmoil and simply walked beside him, offering her presence rather than words. When they reached the device, Jackson explained, in halting Lyraki phrases, what the signal meant. He would have to send a response for Earth to locate him, to guide a rescue team here. Mira listened, nodding slowly, her expression unreadable. Then, in a gesture that transcended language, she took his hands, looking deeply into his eyes. Her gaze seemed to say everything. She understood the pull of his home, the ties that bound him to Earth. But she also understood the grief that would come with his departure. The Lyraki didn't beg or plead, their way was one of acceptance and respect for choice. Mira simply held him close, humming a soft, mournful melody, a Lyraki farewell that resonated in Jackson's chest like a heartbeat. Days passed as Jackson weighed his decision, torn between two worlds. Finally, he returned to the dreamer's voice with a heavy heart. The Lyraki had gathered around, silent and watchful, knowing he had come to a decision. Mira stood at the front, her face calm, her eyes full of understanding and sadness. With trembling hands, Jackson activated the device and sent a brief, coded message back to Earth, confirming his presence. The signal wasn't strong, he couldn't be sure it would reach, but he felt a strange relief wash over him. He had sent his choice into the cosmos, surrendering to whatever fate lay ahead. Now, all he could do was wait. In the days that followed, the Lyraki treated him like a departing hero, preparing gifts for his journey, weaving garments from the glowing moss, creating small charms from river stones and forest leaves. Each Lyraki had something to offer, a small token of gratitude, a piece of themselves to accompany him wherever he went. Mira's gift was last, and perhaps the most precious. She handed him a delicate crystal vial, filled with a small amount of luminous sap from a rare, sacred tree. It was a symbol of their bond, a connection between them that transcended worlds. She held his gaze as she pressed it into his hands, her expression saying all the words that their language couldn't convey. Jackson felt a tear slip down his cheek, and Mira gently wiped it away, humming the same soft melody from their first night together. When the day finally came, Jackson stood at the edge of the village, looking back at the tribe he had come to love. The twin moons shone down, casting their silvery light over the luminous jungle, the place he had called home for 2 decades. The Lyraki sang a parting song, a resonant farewell that filled the clearing with bittersweet harmonies. Jackson felt each note like a pull on his heart, and he wondered if he was making the right choice, if he was abandoning a life more meaningful than anything he'd ever known. As he activated the small escape pod he had pieced together from his salvaged ship and Lyraki technology, Jackson watched the Lyraki fade from view. Mira stood at the edge of the clearing, her violet eyes reflecting the soft glow of the pod's lights, her hand raised in a final goodbye. As the pod lifted, Jackson looked down one last time, the sight of the Laraki village becoming a small, luminous patch amid the dark expanse of the jungle. His heart ached with every mile that stretched between them, but he held Myra's gift tightly, as if it could somehow bridge the impossible distance. In the cold quiet of space, as the pod hurtled back toward the familiar stars of his own galaxy, Jackson felt both exhilaration and sorrow, a strange emptiness where his. The journey back to Earth felt surreal, like slipping from one dream into another. After 20 years, Jackson Reed was going home, but as the cold quiet of space closed around him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaving behind his heart. He held Myra's gift, the small vial of luminous sapclose, its soft glow a reminder of the life and love he had left on Lyris 9. His thoughts swirled with the songs of the Laraki, their faces etched in his memory, their voices haunting his dreams. The pod's automated systems guided him through re-entry, and after a harrowing descent through Earth's atmosphere, Jackson found himself staring out at a sprawling desert landscape. He was rescued within hours, airlifted to a medical facility where doctors and scientists buzzed around him, stunned by his survival and captivated by his strange story. The world welcomed him back as a hero, the lone survivor of the Solace, a symbol of human resilience against the unknown. Yet the Earth Jackson had returned to was both familiar and unrecognizable. Cities were larger, colder, and faster. New technologies had sprouted in his absence, sleek, unfeeling, and far removed from the organic harmony he'd experienced with the Laraki. People rushed from one task to another, their voices lost in the mechanical hum of modern life. He saw the world through Laraki eyes now, and it left him feeling more alien on Earth than he had ever felt on Lyris 9. As the weeks passed, Jackson became the subject of countless interviews, news segments, and even scientific studies. People were fascinated by his tale of survival, but their interest seemed to be rooted in the fantastical, not the deeply personal reality he had experienced. To them, the Laraki were an oddity, a curiosity. But to Jackson, they were family, and his stories felt hollow without the melodies, gestures, and meaning only the Laraki could understand. One night, as Jackson looked up at the familiar night sky from his apartment's small balcony, he felt a pang of loss so intense it took his breath away. He had returned to Earth, but his soul felt stranded in the jungles of Lyris 9, where the stars whispered and the land pulsed with life. Every night, he replayed the farewell melody the Laraki had sung for him, humming it softly under his breath, hoping it might bridge the gap between worlds. But the sky remained silent, and Earth felt more foreign by the day. Desperate to connect to what he had left behind, Jackson threw himself into his work, attempting to bridge human technology with the organic machines he had learned to understand on Lyris 9. He studied everything he could about bioorganic engineering, fascinated with recreating the Laraki's harmony between technology and nature. He experimented with new designs, blending organic materials with metals and electronics, hoping to capture some semblance of the beauty he had experienced. One day, while tinkering in a research lab, Jackson succeeded in creating a small, bioorganic device that pulsed faintly with its own energy. It wasn't alive in the way the Laraki's machines were, but it was closer than anything Earth had yet seen. When he touched the device, it resonated with a faint humming note that reminded him of the Laraki songs. It was a start, a spark of something real, and for the first time since returning to Earth, Jackson felt a flicker of hope. As his project grew, Jackson found himself being asked to speak at conferences and scientific forums. His knowledge of alien technology and bioorganic engineering was invaluable, and soon, scientists, engineers, and environmentalists alike were captivated by his ideas. Jackson advocated for a new approach to technology, one that respected the environment and embraced the interconnectedness he had learned from the Laraki. He spoke about machines that could grow and adapt, tools that harmonized with the world instead of consuming it. Over time, Jackson's vision began to resonate. His ideas inspired research in sustainable technologies and bioorganic engineering, sparking a movement toward a more balanced relationship with the environment. He worked tirelessly, creating prototypes of machines that could adapt and heal, systems that would live alongside humans, rather than against nature. But as fulfilling as this work was, it still felt like a pale reflection of what he had left behind. As years passed, Jackson's influence grew, and Earth began to adopt elements of the Loraki philosophy. Green technology flourished, cities started incorporating bioorganic systems, and Jackson's name became synonymous with this new wave of sustainable engineering. People called him a visionary, a pioneer, but Jackson knew he was only a bridge, trying to share what he had been taught by the tribe who had saved his life and shaped his soul. But despite his success, Jackson felt the emptiness grow. He missed the Loraki deeply, their voices, their songs, and the quiet nights under twin moons. He had everything Earth could offer: a respected career, wealth, and accolades, but his heart remained stranded light years away, a ghost among the luminous jungles of Lyris 9. One evening, as he walked alone through a park, surrounded by the bioluminescent plants he had helped introduce to Earth's landscape, Jackson felt a familiar tune drift through his mind. It was the farewell song the Loraki had sung, a melody he had replayed in his mind countless times, hoping it would reach across the stars. In a moment of pure impulse, he hummed the melody out loud, closing his eyes and letting the song fill the quiet night air. He imagined Myra's face, her gentle smile, her violet eyes, and the shimmering lights of the Loraki village. A single tear slipped down his cheek as he whispered into the stillness, "Myra, can you hear me?" As he opened his eyes, something incredible happened. His communicator, a small, custom device he had crafted as a blend of Earth and Loraki technology, began to hum faintly, resonating with a familiar tune. He stared in disbelief as the device emitted a series of tones, rising and falling in the unmistakable rhythm of Loraki song. His heart pounded as he realized what it meant. Somewhere, on the far side of the universe, someone was answering his call. Trembling with excitement, Jackson adjusted the device, aligning it with the tones, amplifying the signal, and then clear as day a voice drifted through, melodic, resonant, and achingly familiar. "Jackson," the voice sang, filled with warmth and longing. It was Myra. Her voice reached him, traveling across the stars, as if she were standing right beside him. Jackson felt a surge of emotions he could barely contain, relief and joy mingling with the ache of 20 years' separation. "Myra," he whispered, voice thick with tears. "I've missed you." Her voice continued, a soft, soothing melody that conveyed everything words could not. Jackson could feel her presence, as if her spirit were with him in that moment. They spoke in fragmented phrases, their conversation carried by the music, a delicate symphony of reunion that transcended the limitations of space and time. In the days that followed, Jackson poured himself into expanding the communication link, determined to make contact with the Loraki permanent. He shared his progress with scientists, calling on his newfound allies to develop a more sophisticated system. News of the communication with the Loraki spread, captivating the world, and soon, Jackson's dream became a global mission. Through this newfound connection, Earth learned more about the Loraki and their ways, forming an unprecedented alliance between the two worlds. The Loraki shared their knowledge of bioorganic technology, and Earth, in return, offered their advances in communication and engineering. Jackson became the bridge he had always felt himself to be, uniting his two homes in a bond of mutual respect and understanding. Years later, standing on a stage before a crowd of people, Jackson looked out at a world transformed by the Loraki's influence. His life had come full circle, his work no longer just a tribute to his lost family but a testament to the bond between two worlds. As he finished his speech, Jackson felt the familiar hum of his communicator in his pocket, a melody calling to him from Lyris 9. He walked away from the crowd, listening to Myra's song as it drifted through the air. And as he looked up at the stars, Jackson smiled, knowing that he would never truly be alone. His family was always with him, across the stars, singing him home.